thank you all for being here tonight on a Wednesday evening. It's an honor to be able to talk about something I wrote about a year ago or so. Moneyballing music is a term that I stole from a book by Michael Lewis about Moneyball, the art of winning an unfair game, and it's about baseball. So yeah, this is a term that I took from this book, and it's essentially how the team and Billy Bean, the manager, used evidence-based objective analysis to choose their players, as opposed to subjective wisdom. And they ended up doing really well on a very low budget. And now it's kind of it's a given, and a lot of baseball teams now use it as standard. So we thought that if this can be done in baseball, then why not music? And when it comes to talking about statistics in music, what we're really talking about is the global online consumer activity and the conversation that's happening around the music. So that's essentially your social media activity by the consumers. And that can be anything from your Facebook likes to Twitter followers to Shazam tags to Wikipedia page views and all the way to pirated content. And this really is big data. It's quite unwieldy, it's large, it's complex. It moves very, very quickly. So what we're trying to do when we talk about big data in terms of analyzing it, we're really trying to use predictive analysis to extrapolate and extract the value from this sea of information. So you might ask, why should we give a crap about big data? Everything seems fine the way it is. The reason why we should care is because music consumption has already changed, and the exchange of music has already changed. So it's a lot more weightless, automatic, it's privatized, mobile, and it has got more and more invisible. You can't really rely on sales figures anymore to tell you, give you a clear indication of how something is performing. And on top of that, fortunately for us, music is fundamentally social. It's inherently social. It's embedded in our social activities, and so are, fortunately, the platforms that it lives on. So we can use those platforms, which are making the music consumption exchange invisible, to draw off this big data and learn about our audiences and our artists, and hopefully then make this consumption a little bit less invisible. The problem with this is that it's not cheap, and it costs a lot of money to do all those things that I've said there, from searching for it to capturing it, all the way to sharing it and even worrying about privacy. And the problem with that is obviously it's not very accessible, which is why only those who can afford to do it and who have the resources to do it are dealing with it, which is essentially major labels and people, for example, like Spotify. So Spotify have this thing called collaborative filtering, which is a similar thing. It's very complex algorithms and statistics. I saw some of their matrices and didn't understand it, and moved on very quickly. They deal with this thing which is quite similar to Amazon and Netflix, where they say that, okay, if you listen to songs X, Y, and Z, then those songs are probably similar. And if you liked song Y, then you're probably willing to like song X as well. But it's not quite perfect. So whilst they may say unintentionally with the genre collaboration that you see there, so One Direction fans are more likely to listen to Justin Bieber, whereas Tupac fans are more likely to listen to Notorious B.I.G. But obviously, I'm assuming that Spotify algorithms won't know the difference between East Coast and West Coast rap. So it's not necessarily going to give you the perfect results that you want. To kind of enhance what they are trying to do, they recently partnered with, well, they bought a company called Econest, which is an incredible company dealing with big data, and then you've also got Next Big Sound. To put it into context, Econest collected 1 trillion points of data last year, and they have this music audience understanding system amongst various other things, and what they do is they plug all this data in, and they can even figure out, based on their algorithms, what films you watch and also how you will vote. So whilst that's a little bit scary, I think it's actually really beautiful, because music is no longer a thing anymore that someone does in a closed room. It's everywhere, and it's linked to all the other content that we're consuming. So it becomes more and more relevant and interesting and important to understand how the music consumption and exchange is linked to the other content, for example, the films you watch. And Next Big Sound is another one as well. They collected 435 billion data points And they look at, I think, 200 artist metrics, and they can even tell you based on an event. So if your artist performed at Jules Holland, how that might then affect the sales of the next single. And you might have heard a lot about the move of Zane Lowe to Apple. That was in the papers a lot, front headlines. So while Spotify are in the headlines for pairing up with big data companies, Apple are apparently championing the subjective human element and the curation. But what you might not have heard is that they quietly bought up another brilliant company called Summetric, which had a smaller company within it called Music Metric, and they were similar in the sense that they work with big data for music and similar to Econest. And what this tells us is that as streaming is becoming more and more important, it's now part of the official charts. That these guys, the people between us and our audience, the people distributing the music, they have now understood the value of big data, and they've now understood they can optimize what they are offering by understanding our consumers a little bit better, hopefully. And within the industry, people are starting to wake up and realize this. So Warner partnered with Shazam, also not too long ago. To put this into context, Shazam now has, I think, 100 million monthly active users. And these monthly active users are responsible for 17 million tags of TV shows and ads and songs per day. And that was last year. And they're the ones who predicted the likes of Sam Smith and Haim and Martin Garrix, Vance Joy, and the list goes on. So what Warner can do is they can look at this data and that goes beyond the top 200 charts and essentially pair it with their A&R methods at the moment. And as A&R becomes more and more crowdsourced, Shazam is more of a viable option to find new artists. It's being looked upon as an okay source. So I know of a label who have their traditional A&R meetings, but then also running parallel to that, they also have a purely Shazam-based meeting. So they'll pull out they'll print out the top 200 charts, look at it, and go, right, what are the options here? Which I guess people would find ridiculous a few years ago. Similar to that, Larry Cohen, who's the ex-CEO of Warner Music Group, he started a company called 300, and they recently partnered with Twitter. And what that allows them to do is to tap into the music information that Twitter has, and that includes location tags. So again, to put it into context, 2 years ago, the number of tweets for music ramped up to 1 billion, and I'm sure it's gone up by now as well. So essentially what 300 can do, their offices are in New York, they can sit there and try and find the hottest new rapper in the local scene, somewhere from LA to Berlin to wherever. But does that necessarily mean that we should then just stop going to gigs and stop looking at human recommendations and just sit and look at next sound charts and Twitter charts? And absolutely not. Because if you think about it in the sense that what we do, big data shouldn't replace what we do. Big data should bolster it. It should form about 20% of what we do. And 80% is still the subjectivity, the wisdom, and the experience. And the idea is that if we can use that 20% to strengthen that 80%, and go in with 100%, well, as close to 100% as possible, then why not? I mean, big data isn't supposed to be used to find the next Adele or the next Sam Smith, but it might help you to look in the right place, or at least get you there before anybody else. And there was a study done that showed that great songs will always do really well, and really crap songs will do really badly. But any song in between, there's a lot of uncertainty. We don't know how they're going to do because there's various factors, which means that there's a lot of risk in a subjective business. And we are in business, and we do have to worry about sales figures and profit margins and all that kind of stuff. So what big data tries to do is to reduce that risk. And Forbes did this study where they said that A&R was apparently a $4.5 billion industry. And if Next Big Sound can predict album sales within 20% accuracy for about 85% of artists, then why not? And I don't think that this is us being cautious. I think that this is not us going for safe bets, but it's keeping that 80% ahead of the game and empowering our decisions with with really hard facts and really up-to-date and dynamic facts. Because at the end of the day, it is how you feel. We're in a very subjective industry, so it's not about replacing what we do. Just because you like the Vamps, for example, doesn't mean that you're going to like a band that looks and sounds exactly like them. Say, for example, 5 Seconds of Summer. But you just might. And this is where big data tries to bridge that gap. And it kind of goes beyond the demographic segmentation and the genre segmentation to look at exactly what you're doing. And this is kind of where we want to get to. So big data isn't trying to form sweeping statements about marketing and A&R. What it's trying to do is get to that guy over there and give the individual the content that they want, the right content, and the right content that they might like at the right time, on the right platform, and also for the right price. And in my paper, I spoke about consumer understanding and A&R, but obviously big data can go far beyond that into ticketing and merchandising, cross-media promotion and brand partnerships, and I think we're just scratching the surface. And the point of it is not to turn it into data science. The point of it is to be able to understand these guys on the left a lot better, the audience, so that we can then help these guys on the right, the artists, to have a more successful, lucrative, and a longer career. And that's kind of what Moneyballing music is about. And I'll hand over to these guys now. Thank you very much.
I am very old, and I'm very old school, and I've made £1 million decisions based on whether the hairs on my arms stand up or not. And if you were to level it out on a playing field, in terms of just letting the data do the data and making decisions based on that, then a good 50 to 75% of the music's greatest moments wouldn't have occurred. Alt J probably wouldn't have existed if it was based on metadata on the process. So I think I'm all in favour of help, and I'm all in favour of anything that gets us away from the dog biscuits and the A&R jokes. But the process of trying to only use the data for what it's there as an aid rather than actually follow the data, especially when you get into the brunt end of radio play and radio charts and how that equates to sales and how that equates to positioning on iTunes or positioning on Spotify, it becomes quite a blunt instrument.
Yes, I mean, I'm an advocate of using it in smart and intelligent ways. I'm not an advocate of saying it replaces everything else. I mean, there's lies, damn lies, and big data. So, if you're not careful, you can be seduced into thinking that it can prove anything you want it to prove. And I think, for the most part, actually, I mean, joking aside, if you look at the kind of commercial applications so far that we've seen and the things that have proved most valuable to people, it's not really been on the A&R side. It's much more on the marketing and the planning, the campaign management, brand matching, touring, and those sorts of areas where the data that you can extract from social media about the fortunes of a particular band in relation to where their fans are, the geography of their fans, for example. You can do that with a good deal of accuracy, and you can change. You can track that over time. You can get a fair amount of demographic information too, so you can get. You probably know actually if you're marketing a band. If you don't know what the demographic is and you're marketing them, then you're probably in deep shit. But the fact is that the social media will give you a confirmation of that.
I think there are 2 points of view on this, and I've actually stolen a provocative statement from the Pew Research Centre on the topic of big data. And it is essentially, thanks to many changes, including the building of the Internet of Things, human and machine analysis of big data will cause more problems than it solves by 2020. The existence of huge data sets for analysis will engender false confidence in our predictive powers and will lead many to make significant and hurtful mistakes. Moreover, analysis of big data will be misused by powerful people and institutions with selfish agendas who manipulate findings to make the case for what they want. And the advent of big data has a harmful impact because it serves the majority, at times inaccurately, while diminishing the minority and ignoring important outliers. Overall, the rise of big data is a big negative for society in nearly all respects. And I think whilst that is an extremely extreme viewpoint, I think there are kind of a number of important takeaways in that. One of the things that I've seen consistently, both in my time in the record industry and outside of that, is manipulation of data, particularly within social media networks, from the early days of MySpace and buying or automating likes. And I think this means that the playing field still isn't level. How can we guarantee quality in the data that we're mining? Who controls quality of the data and how it is mined? And then how are we going to make decisions on the back of that?